Hi, everyone. My name is Vivien Sharon, real estate broker with Sotheby's International Realty Canada. I'm very excited today to welcome you to my series, Coffee with Vivien Live. So let me get my coffee and we're ready to start. So today's episode is about 8 proven ways to women's healthy aging. In this episode of Coffee with Vivien Live, I'm very excited to have a special guest here today. Dr. Vivien Brown is an author and family physician in Toronto and a passionate advocate for women's health. But before we continue, let me tell you a little bit about this series. In previous episodes, I spoke to a financial expert and writer for Forbes.com. Other topics included modern marriage from a legal viewpoint, the challenges that seniors face with regard to health and their own housing needs, interior design tips for 2021, how the environment affects real estate values, classical learning from the comfort of your home, smart home technology, design tips for 2021, how to write a book to increase your sales, and most recently, family legacy planning. So Coffee with Vivien covers many topics of interest: real estate, design, lifestyle, the environment, technology, culture, health, food, and more. So I am the author of the recently published book, The Boomer's 7-Step Guide to Downsizing, Overcoming Fear, and Discovering Freedom. So here is a little cover of my book. And I encourage you to go to my website, viviensharon.com/book, where you will find many tips and strategies to help adult children and their parents through the emotions of downsizing, or you can order a hard copy on Amazon. So our guest today is Dr. Vivien Brown. Dr. Brown is a family physician in Toronto and is a passionate advocate of women's health. She speaks across North America on reducing cancer risks and cancer prevention, adult immunization and vaccine preventable diseases, stress in the workplace and stress management, health promotion and healthy aging, osteoporosis prevention, menopause, and other important areas of women's health. The College of Family Physicians of Ontario named Dr. Brown Physician of the Year for the region of Toronto, awarded in 2012. She is a past president of the Federation of Medical Women of Canada. So welcome, Vivien.
Thank you so much. It's really fun to be here, and thank you for having me.
Oh, we're really excited to hear what you have to say, and I'm so happy you're our guest today. So we have 3 topics that we are going to discuss today. The first one is the impact of daily stress, how stress affects our mental and physical health. Second topic is sleep important, and women and aging, including nutrition, exercise, bone and heart health, cholesterol, diabetes, and more. So we really have quite a number of very important topics to talk about. Before we begin, though, do you have your coffee ready?
I do.
Okay, so we'll just take a little.
I love my coffee.
We'll just take a little photo op and we'll hold our coffee for a second. Fantastic, great. So we'll put this away and we will have our little chat. So welcome to Coffee with Vivien, with the 2 Viviens. I just have to throw this in. Vivien and Vivien, this has never happened before. I rarely meet another Vivien, I must say, and also with the exact same spelling, which is totally fun and very, very unique. So it's Coffee with the 2 Viviens today.
So fun.
Let's begin with Dr. Brown. So in 2017, you wrote a book, and I have the book right here, and it's called A Women's Guide to Healthy Aging. And then 3 years later, in 2020, you wrote a sequel, and I have it here. Oh, that's the other one. Sorry. I have it here. So in 2020, you wrote the sequel, The New Women's Guide to Healthy Aging, 8 Proven Ways to Keep You Vibrant, Happy, Healthy, and Strong. So what has happened in these 3 years that has changed to make you write a follow-up book so quickly?
So it's a really good question, Vivien. And what happens, and I think the whole world has seen how quickly medicine evolves. 2 years ago, nobody knew the word COVID. Everything changes in medicine very quickly. And I wanted to keep the book as updated as possible with new medications, new information. In the new version, I talked about how to do a virtual call with your doctor, because what we know is so much of medicine is being done virtually now. And I also added a chapter on women's sexual function, because in Canada now there's a new medication that we can use for sexual dysfunction. When we look at women's health and when we look at health in general, you've mentioned stress as being one of the things that's important. I think it's one of the most important areas, because we know that stress itself is not a disease, but stress impacts on almost every other disease. And I want to tell you about some really interesting research. Vivien, have you ever heard the term telomeres? Do you know what that refers to?
Not really.
Okay, so telomeres are the caps on the ends of chromosomes. And what telomeres do, and the enzyme that's involved is called telomerase, they keep the cell healthy. And the cell keeps dividing over time and eventually gets worn out. So as we age, we end up needing glasses, we end up maybe needing a hearing aid. Our cells, our immune system, our general health gets weaker with age. Well, telomeres protect us, and telomeres keep our cells vibrant and healthy. In 2009, a doctor named Elizabeth Blackburn did some research and ended up getting the Nobel Prize, because what she looked at is she looked at the impact of stress on telomeres, which in a sense is like saying the impact of stress on aging, on the aging of our cells. She took 2 groups of women. She had one group that had healthy children, and she took another group with chronically ill children. So that was her model. The healthy women with healthy children were her model for the control group, and the healthy women with chronically ill children were the model for her stress group. She measured their telomeres, she measured their telomerase, and what she found is over time, the women with chronically ill children had telomeres and telomerase that was the equivalent of 10 years older than the equivalent women with healthy children. So what she was able to show is that stress does not just have an emotional impact. It's not just affecting our mood. It's affecting our physical health. It's affecting our telomeres, and it's aging us too quickly. And when you look at the American president, look at Obama as an example. Handsome man, came into the presidency, playing basketball with the Secret Service, looking very young and vibrant. At the end of 8 years, he had aged 20 years. When you looked at his pictures, at the creases in his face, at his hair, at his posture, at his walking, everything had changed in 8 years with that chronic, unrelenting stress. So when we look at stress for the average person, what we want to do is be very conscious and mindful that we want to work every day to decrease our stress and protect our bodies so that we age in a healthy way.
It is such an incredibly important topic. And stress, I think probably from what you're saying, and we know this, is the cornerstone to a lot of the health issues we're having. And it could be autoimmune, it could be, I don't know, so many, which we're going to cover here. So how, with a life that is so busy and so hectic for everybody, and together with what we've all been through this past number of this year plus as we're through COVID and coming to the end of it, how can we handle our stress?
So in the study that Dr. Blackburn did, it was not how sick the child was that impacted the level of stress in the mother. It was her perception of stress. So she may have had a very ill child, but if she perceived herself as doing everything she needed to, having good supports, being on top of everything, she did not age as quickly as someone whose perception of stress was greater. And I think that's a key point. You know, we may be very busy, but if we see it as a challenge and interesting and we're, you know, academically connected, we may not have the perception of stress, where someone could be home alone doing very little and feel incredibly stressed. So it's our perception of the stress that we have. And we need to learn ways to mitigate that stress. You know, for some of us, the strategies that we had, going to the gym, meeting friends for coffee, all those strategies were taken away with COVID. So we need to look at other strategies, whether it's mindfulness training, which you can do online, whether it's doing a yoga class on a Zoom call, whether it's having a Zoom call with your friends and having coffee or a glass of wine. You know, being socially connected, being mindful about what you're choosing to do, and framing your stress or concerns about stress to be a challenge rather than a burden makes a huge difference.
So really our state of mind and what we build up in our head, and many of us have fears in our head that create stresses that keep us up at night. There's no question. And I would think that insomnia must be huge. And then one walks around during the day totally tired, and it's not safe in any way. So what can you tell us, though, dealing with the stress, trying to keep our minds relaxed and trying to have a night's sleep? What can we do about that?
Well, one of the first things to do, I think, is to have some insight into how you feel. You know, if you're very physically wound up and you've been working all day and on your laptop, and then you look at the clock and you say, oh my goodness, it's 5 to 11, I must go to sleep right now, jump into bed and think you're going to fall asleep. It doesn't work that way. There is a concept of sleep hygiene, and I think this is really important. Sleep hygiene is just a fancy term for having a routine at bedtime. You know, when we had little children, we would give them dinner, we would give them a bath, we would read a story, we would dim the lights, we'd hold them in the rocking chair, we'd put them into bed, they'd go to sleep. That winding down, that schedule, that familiar routine is very important for us as adults. It's not just for children. So when we talk about sleep hygiene, it's being aware, for example, that you should not be doing work right until the time you go to bed or your mind is too active. We don't want you to do exercise late at night or you're physically are too active. You want that winding down time. Maybe it's reading a book, maybe it's chatting with a friend, but you want that winding down time. Then you want a room that doesn't have a lot of lights in it. You know, we've got all kinds of things that are flashing, things that have been plugged in, and we want to have less of that ambient light around so that the room is dark and the room is cool. And most of the sleep specialists say that a bedroom and a bed should be for sleeping or sex, and that's it. It's not for eating, it's not for watching TV, it's not for being on your computer. It really is the environment telling you that it's time to calm down, time to relax. The other thing that's really interesting, Vivien, is you're supposed to go to bed at the same time and get up at the same time, whether you've had a good night's sleep or not. By having a routine of timing for bedtime and getting up time, you're less likely to get migraine headaches, and you're more likely to have a reasonable sleep time. Because if you stay up very late one night and then try and catch up by sleeping in, you throw off your circadian rhythm and you actually don't do better, you do worse. So some of those sleep hygiene sort of rules or guidelines, I think, are really important.
Absolutely. No, really, really important to have a routine like you suggest, without the phone going late at night and all of those. Decompress. We have to try to do that. Now, just a note that we have a chat going. If anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat. I have some comments, but I'm looking for questions. If they come up, I will raise them for you. So exercise. It's been hard for a lot of us to exercise. I, for one, live in a condo building. It may not be an excuse, but our gym has almost been closed, and trainers and everything, which I had for a long, long time. It's not happening for a year and plus all these months. And we're a lot of us complaining, except now it's nice weather dependent. We have to get out and walk or do something. I guess it's not an excuse, but condo gyms and gyms have been closed. It's really been tough. So what do you suggest we need to do?
So I don't minimize the fact that it has been tough. And some people tell me, you know, Dr. Brown, you've told me about exercise. I know that, but I just don't have the time. That phrase, I just don't have the time, really says it's not my priority. And so if your own health is not your priority, it's going to get you into trouble. And I think exercise is one of those things that's important for our stress level. It's important for our physical health, and it's important for our mental health. So I think having some kind of a device, I don't want to use a trade name, but I will anyway. I use a Fitbit, but some kind of a device to mark your number of steps and aim for getting a certain number of steps every day is really important. Now, if you're a little bit obsessive compulsive and you look at your Fitbit and you haven't done as much as you think you did, you may want to go out a second time and get those extra steps, because regular exercise is essential for brain health, for cardiac health, for stress, for everything that we look at. And, you know, I know life is busy, and the term that I've used with some patients is that hectic is not the same as aerobic. You can be up and down the stairs, you can be doing laundry, you can be trying to make dinner, you may be very busy, but if you're not getting aerobic exercise and getting your heart rate up for a sustained at least 20 to 30 minutes, you're not really helping yourself.
Very important information about keeping active. So we do have a sleep-related question from Carmen. There are relationships where sleep habits of the individual are quite different. One could be a morning person, the other a night owl. What advice would you give for these couples that have different rhythms?
Yeah, I think that's something you have to work out together, but I still think having a regular bedtime and a regular getting up time is important. If you need to have some kind of a mask on, the kinds that they give you when you're on a flight in order to block out the light in the room, if you need to wear earplugs, this is something that you can certainly discuss with your partner. But I think if you try and change your own circadian rhythm, you won't do well. And so you have to do what's best for you. And so that way you'll be your best self during the day. You know, Canadians notoriously don't get enough sleep. And if you get consistently less than 6 hours a night, for your brain, it's like having had a number of glasses of alcohol. So you are slightly impaired when you don't get enough sleep. It's really an important area. And there's a number of new drugs on the market. If this is a significant problem for you, you should speak to your doctor, because sleep is essential. It's not just a symptom of another problem. It's not just you're depressed and you're not sleeping. Sleep itself is really essential. And if you don't sleep, it may lead to other, the term in medicine is comorbidities, but the other medical issues that may be impacted by not getting enough sleep.
So talking about brain health and the aging brain, as you had mentioned about sleep related to that, how can we keep our brains healthy as we age? Women age, men age. I mean, as we all age, how can we keep that our brains healthy if we can? Are dementia and brain illnesses avoidable?
So Vivien, it's a great question, and women should be worried, because 70% of new Alzheimer cases are in women. Women are more at risk than men for a variety of reasons. But you and your audience have already done something good today. One of the things that you can do that's a benefit for brain health is learning something new. By exercising your brain, by learning something new, by keeping connected, you actually improve brain health. So there's a number of things that are really important in terms of general cardiac and brain health. things like not smoking and having appropriate blood pressure and having appropriate cholesterol. Because if you're not getting good blood flow to your brain, you are more at risk. But some of the things that you can be doing on a regular basis right now is staying connected, learning something new every day, being socially connected. So speaking to friends and relatives and partners is very important, and very important to decrease that stress that we've already talked about. Eating in a healthy way, so following the MIND diet. With your permission, I'll just tell you a little bit about the MIND diet.
Please. I was going to go into health, nutrition, and obesity.
So
go for it.
The MIND diet is fantastic. It's a diet that came out of Chicago and is a combination of the Mediterranean diet, which is lots of fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, healthy fats, not too much protein, and the DASH diet. DASH diet, everybody is probably familiar with. It's the low salt diet for cardiac health. Well, what the researchers did in Chicago is they looked at the best features of the Mediterranean diet and the best features of the DASH or low salt diet, and they came up with the MIND diet. And by following the MIND diet, you reduce your risk of dementia. And that includes, lots of fruits and vegetables, high fiber, minimum fats, minimum amounts of heavy duty proteins. It does allow you to have either a handful of grapes or a glass of wine every day. I'll tell you what I choose. But what I like about the MIND diet is you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to follow it 100% of the time. What they saw in research is even if you followed it most of the time, or about 80% of the time, there was still a benefit in a reduction of Alzheimer's disease. And so in the book, I talk a lot about the MIND diet because I think it is a diet that is not difficult to follow. And it does give you a little bit of leeway if it's somebody's wedding or some unexpected celebration. But most of the time, that's the diet that I follow. And it gives me peace of mind that I am lowering my risk for Alzheimer's disease.
So are you minimizing the eating of, let's say, meat protein, beef protein, chicken, and going more in the vegetarian type area?
Yeah, there's some days. So there's some days where I will have either fish or yogurt for the protein at dinner, as opposed to having meat and chicken. I grew up having meat and chicken every day. That was the choices. Now I would say I have that probably 3 times a week. Mm-hmm. And the other days of the week, I'll have either fish, often tuna or salmon, sometimes sushi, but mostly tuna or salmon. But I also eat a lot of Greek yogurt, and I eat a lot of feta cheese. So I'll have a Greek salad for dinner, which I totally enjoy and don't feel like I'm depriving myself of anything. But the protein there is feta cheese. The protein is not a heavy duty meat.
A question about dairy and gluten. I've been hearing, I was raised with eating everything, but I'm hearing more and more dairy-free. One should avoid cow dairy products for various reasons, and also avoid gluten and have gluten-free products. I mean, I guess it depends on one's personal health situation, but it seems so prominent today.
Yeah. So I don't believe in avoiding dairy. And according to Osteoporosis Canada, and osteoporosis is a big deal in women with aging, you're supposed to, or ideally, have 3 dairy products a day. For me, it's low-fat cheese in the morning, a latte at lunchtime, and that's what I'm just finishing now, and often yogurt in the afternoon or for dinner. We want you to have low-fat dairy, and for those people that are sensitive to lactose, you can have lactose-free dairy. But you get the bulk of calcium from dairy products. And no, I don't work for the Milk Marketing Board, but they do a good job. And what we know is when you take calcium as a supplement, it's not nearly as well absorbed as dairy products. Mm-hmm. So I do believe in dairy products. Gluten is a different story, and it depends if you are gluten sensitive or gluten intolerant, and that is different for different people. You can be tested for that. Mm-hmm. You can be evaluated. If you are gluten intolerant, if you have celiac disease, by all means avoid gluten. but most of us don't have celiac disease. We may be sensitive to overdoing it, and it may be that we feel better with smaller amounts, but that again is different for different people.
Okay, that's great, and I'm really happy you explained that. We're going to talk about bone health, women and bone health in 1 second, but we have 2 questions. Rafid is asking, how much of clinical evidence is there on the role of coffee and tea on health in general and sleep in particular?
So when we look at coffee, and thank you, Rafid, for the question, but when we look at coffee and tea, what we're really talking about is caffeine. And in general, some people are much more caffeine sensitive than others. And so when we look at caffeine and sleep interaction, it's generally suggested that you stop caffeine after 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon if you're very caffeine sensitive. Different people have different sensitivities to caffeine, and the maximum servings of caffeine you should have in a day is somewhere between 3 and 4. You know, I have a patient that at one point was having palpitations, and when I went over her history and we discussed it, she was having coffee in the morning and then had something like 5 to 6 Diet Cokes as the day went on, and then coffee later on in the evening, and she was getting palpitations, clearly a side effect of the caffeine. So some people are more caffeine sensitive than others, and some people are taking in much more caffeine than is what advised. We also know that caffeine can affect breast cysticness, or how easily it is to form breast lumps, not breast cancer, but breast cysts. So in general, I suggest that people have minimal amounts of caffeine, and if they are going to have it before noon.
Very good. That makes total sense in my life, because if I drink coffee after 3 p.m., I'm finished. I totally understand that. So we have another question, Ellen Morris. She's asking, for the 2 Viviens I know, and she knows one of them, me, and one she's met and one she hasn't, which I think is you. I tried to have a meatless Monday, for example, and eat plant-based foods on those days only. So she has certain days that she eats.
And I think that's great. I would just caution anybody that's planning to go plant-based to be really careful that you're getting in enough protein. I'm not a dietitian. A registered dietitian can give you better advice. But in general, when you start to substitute beans and tofu and some of those other products, you just want to be sure you're getting complete proteins, and that you're not depriving yourself of protein. Because as we get older, women do lose muscle mass, and when you start to have women who are not getting enough protein in their diet, it does affect their muscles, leading to a term called sarcopenia. And sarcopenia refers to not enough muscle, the way osteopenia refers to not enough bone. So sarcopenia, not having strong muscles, is not good for bone health and for your general health. So I would just caution, if you're having plant-based meals, to be sure you're getting enough protein.
Very, very important. Question about bone health. We know that osteoporosis is quite a problem as women age. And can you tell us what can you tell us about the importance of being strong and healthy and having non-brittle bones as we get older?
Yeah, so we do lose bone when we age, particularly women after menopause. And what we want to do is we want to be very active to fight against that bone loss. Unfortunately, about 1 in 5 women are at risk for bone loss and may end up with a major fracture. And when you do have a hip fracture, there is a significant mortality or death from that, as well as morbidity altering your life. So bone health is really important. And some of the basics for bone health we've already discussed. Exercise to keep your bone and muscles strong, enough calcium, which is a minimum of 3 servings of dairy a day, and vitamin D. It's really important that you take vitamin D as a supplement, because we don't get enough vitamin D from the sun in North America. Even if you're out in the sun, you wear sunblock that blocks out the vitamin D, and so it's not well absorbed. So for women over the age of 50, Osteoporosis Canada says 1,000 to 2,000 units, international units per day. And vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, which means don't take it on an empty stomach. You take it with food or after food. So I take 2,000 a day, and working really hard to do exercise, I would say 5 to 6 days a week. Nobody manages 7 days a week, I don't think. And also trying deliberately to have 3 servings of dairy a day.
Very important. Okay. So we have a question from Rachel Walters. Hi to both Viviens. Is soy still a concern because of the estrogen? Do you need to limit soy in your diet? It's hard to eat plant-based if you cut out soy.
So hi, Rachel, and thanks for tuning in today. What the issue is that soy has estrogen-like properties. And so Japanese women who have been brought up on soy from the time they're babies actually have less symptoms of menopause because they have this soy in their diet on a regular basis. When you add in soy to a North American diet for women, say in their 40s, it doesn't do much. What we do know is women who have breast cancer may be extremely estrogen sensitive. And for that reason, a number of the oncologists do not want you taking extra soy in your diet because of the estrogen-like properties it has. I think that affects a small number of women who have estrogen-sensitive breast cancer, and they would not be advised to have soy on a regular basis. That doesn't mean you can't have soy sauce, once in 2 weeks when you're having sushi, but you would be deliberately increasing soy in your diet. For the average woman, I don't think it makes much of a difference.
Okay, very good. So I have a surprise question that I'm going to throw out at you as we're sort of nearing the end of our time. And the question is, are you worried more about women and their health today than you were a year ago?
It is a surprise question, but I think the answer is very clear. And the answer is absolutely yes. I think women have had a much more difficult time with the pandemic and with the isolation and with the responsibilities both of older parents, younger children, homeschooling. There's been an increase in anxiety, an increase in depression, an increase in domestic violence. Women have dropped out of the workforce at much greater numbers than men have because they haven't been able to cope with all the responsibilities. And even academic medical women have not published as much in the last year as men. So at every level of society, women have been burdened with greater home responsibilities and greater stresses. So I would say I am more worried, and I do think it's really important for women to pay attention to their health. And one of the things I tell my patients is when you pay attention to your own health and you take time for yourself, whether it's to exercise or to eat healthy, you're not being selfish, you're actually being selfless. Because if you take care of yourself, you'll be there strong and healthy to take care of someone else. And if you don't take care of yourself, it's very, very easy to slip through the cracks. So I think that's a fair question. I think it's a good question. And unfortunately, I think the answer is yes.
So in other words, you'll be seeing patients. And of course, we know that your practice is both men and women, and I believe children as well.
Yes, and I wanted to share with you, I've been working at the vaccination clinics for various hospitals, and I was working on the weekend at one of the hospital sites in Toronto, and this older man came in with his much older mother, and I asked her how old she was, and she told me that she was 106, and here she was living in the community, coming in with her son, who was probably in his late 70s, and they're both doing well, and they both were getting vaccinated. And so what I want to encourage people is that's the way we want to be. We want to be in the community. We want to be connected. We want to be able to go out to a vaccine clinic and, do what we need to do about our health. But I gave them a lot of positive feedback about how great it was that he was well enough to take care of her and bring her into a clinic like this.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up, we didn't touch on, and I had it here, but we sort of got into many directions about the importance of vaccines to avoid preventable diseases. What can you tell us about the vaccines that we're taking for COVID and others that we've had to take for so many years?
So Vivien, I have to share with you and the audience, I'm totally biased. I totally believe in vaccines because in my life as a family doctor, I've seen deaths from vaccine preventable diseases. I've seen a death from meningitis. I've seen deaths from cervical cancer. I've seen horrendous disease from shingles. I've seen deaths from pneumonia. And in the last year, I've had some deaths related to COVID. We have phenomenal vaccines in Canada. And yes, the rollout for COVID vaccines has been slower than what we've wanted, but we've ramped up in the last month. We need to get our adult and adolescent population immunized, because when we immunize, we decrease the risk of these diseases, and these diseases are killer diseases. You know, worldwide measles vaccine is down by about 57%. We're going to start hearing about measles outbreaks. These vaccines have been around for 50 years. We need to be sure that everybody gets the appropriate vaccines for their appropriate age.
And what about the youngsters from young babies to age 12 who it doesn't seem like they're getting anytime soon the COVID vaccines? Are they going to be getting them soon?
There's a lot of vaccines that they do get. So we protect them against polio and measles and you know, varicella or chickenpox and meningitis. But the research is now looking at children from 2 months to 12 about vaccines for COVID. So I think that there'll be more information coming in the next year or so. Right now in Canada, we're vaccinating 12 and above with the Pfizer vaccine. Moderna's just applied to Health Canada to do 12 and above. Moderna right now is 18 and above. The bottom line is, yes, we should be vaccinated and prevent these truly deadly diseases.
Wow. So important as our final wrap-up question about vaccines. I'm so glad that we managed to cover that right now. Thank you. So, Dr. Brown, how can people get in touch with you?
So I do have a website, and you can connect with me through drvivienbrown.com. I have been asked, and I'm flattered at the questions, but I'm not taking new patients in my private practice. I'm working as much as I can at this stage. But it's been a total pleasure to be here. I hope that people buy the book and find it interesting, because I've tried to answer a lot of these questions in a way that people can understand. And some of the things I've added in the book is how to have a virtual visit. I've given you some of the websites. You know, when I talk about dairy and Osteoporosis Canada, you may want to go to the website yourself and look at what they have to say. And so I think if you look at the book and have some questions, then hopefully you can connect with your own physician and go over anything that you may feel pertains to you.
That's wonderful. So we're seeing here on the screen your website, your media work, and so much that you've done. So please check out Dr. Vivien Brown's website and look into this book, which is really very, very important, expanded information to what we've discussed today. So we're just going through the website at this moment. So this ends our episode for today. I thank everyone for joining me, and I really thank our guest, Dr. Vivien Brown. It's been really informative and most important to talk to you today about women and health and leading a healthy life. And I thank you all for joining us today. And in the next episode of Coffee with Vivien Live, which will be on Wednesday, June the 23rd, we will feature Renee Suen, top food, restaurant, and travel writer and photographer, who will discuss, is Toronto a top food destination? And how does Toronto stack up against other foodie cities around the globe? So that's it for today. You can follow me and this series on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, or on my website, viviensharon.com/live. So please like this video, leave a comment if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you so much, Vivien.
Thank you.